So, if you don't know me, I am Shelley McHenry. I'm Technology Innovation Coach for Southampton County Public Schools, and this is our first Coffee PD. So, as I was explaining, the idea is that we're going to do this each Friday, at least as long as we're virtual, and there will always be 3 sessions available. One will be mine, which I plan on being a real strong emphasis on Schoology. And then our second one will rotate between other IT staff. And then the third one is where I'm hoping that actually some of you folks will reach out to me about some things that you are trying in the classroom or that your peers are, if they're not real good about selling themselves, and we can bring in some guest host. So for this week in here, we are doing a Schoology Bootcamp on a couple of specific skills that I think you're ready for if you're not already using it. I know some of you are. We also have Mrs. Crowder, the high school media specialist, doing a session on all the free resources available to you and your students. So I do suggest going back and watching that recording because we're offering lots of ebooks and even the ability to get like classroom sets of ebooks with some of the new programs that we're going to offer teachers. So lots of good information there. I see we have a lot of elementary teachers who are joining us, and Stephanie Whitehead, our elementary ITRT, is doing a session this morning on CPD1, which is now available to you. So that will be something really important for our elementary teachers to have a grasp on. It's going to help you solve some of the issues if your littles are too little to get that whole PDF thing down. Seesaw, I think, is going to be your answer to that. Jamie Elliott, our middle school ITRT, is also with Stephanie today, looking at the possible application of that in a middle school setting. So let me go ahead and share my screen and give you an idea of what we are doing today. I'm really bad about this. Okay, stop. All right, there we go. Okay, so for today, for Schoology Bootcamp, we are looking at 2 features. The first one is student completion rules. And before I forget, I do want to give a shout out to Melissa Andre, because when we had that follow-up Schoology training with the small group training and some of the middle school teachers came over, she kind of like first brought my attention to this. And then I went back in and studied it and looked into it a little bit more. And there are some really helpful things with this. So we're going to spend a good piece of our time there looking at this idea of how to dictate the order in which students complete assignments. And then secondly to that, we're going to spend time looking at how you can build rubrics in Schoology. And I know, as an English teacher, rubrics are foundational to my course, but I think you might be surprised if you think they don't relate to you, because I found a lot of elementary level rubrics that are going to make grading really quick and easy for you. But like with everything else, we're going to front load it to save ourselves time later. So let's jump in. I'm a little frazzled this morning, a little thrown off routine, as I'm sure many of us are, working from where we didn't think we would be working from. So I'm going to rely on my notes a little more than I usually would. As always, if you would like me to drop you a copy of my notes, just send me an email or a message and I'll be glad to do that. So this is where we're going. This is actually I'm going to go here. This is a course that I don't have until next semester, but I have used it to load it up with some activities for today. So there's some students next semester probably wondering why they're getting assignments. All right, so right here is where we're going to spend the first part of this Schoology Bootcamp training. Now, if you have any questions or comments, if this is something you actively use, I would love to hear about how you're using it. So we'll pause in that transition, moving from student completion to Rubrics, just to open it up to any questions or comments or share time. And we'll do the same after the rubric session. So feel free to put questions in chat. Mr. McKinley will monitor that for you. Or just to unmute yourself and to join the conversation after this. And also, if you have general Schoology questions or concerns, like I said earlier, on the other side of Coffee PD each Friday, I am happy to stay behind and just help you one-on-one, small group, whatever we need to get you ready for the next week. Just a sec. Live PDs, right? Okay, so student completion rules is a great way to guide and monitor student progress through your course activities. It also controls student pacing in your course and prevents them from moving on until they have mastered the current content. And we're going to look at what that actually means as we work through this skill. Now, this is an enterprise only feature. So some of you folks who are, on that Schoology Facebook page, I like to point out to you that not everyone has the level of Schoology that we do. And so we have a lot more things available to us that not all Schoology users do. This would be an example of that. If we did not actually have an enterprise account, this would not even be an option. All right, so first of all, student completion options are only available if you use folders. So in some meaningful way, whatever works for your course, you're going to have to include folders for this to show up and to activate. Got someone chasing his tail over here. Okay, so why might you want to do this? So I think back to a lot of the complaints and issues that I heard during spring when we were doing the emergency virtual learning, and something I saw with other teachers at the high school, especially in the environment of giving completion grades. If you gave an assignment that required some intensive reading or some involved answering, students would sometimes skip over those and go to those quick multiple choice tests or the quick quizzes and just kind of play with those numbers to get their grade to that passing point. So by activating this feature, you can prevent that. You can require that a student read something before they complete an assignment, or that they complete the pre-work before they take the quiz, or that they pass by a certain percentage before they move on to the next activity. So that's one way. Melissa, when she was explaining to me how I think the math teachers used it last year at the middle school, is they would have students that may not come to class on Tuesday and come back on Wednesday and jump into Wednesday's assignments, but they missed that work on Tuesday that prepared them for the work on Wednesday. So there's two different ways that you can use student completion. We first of all can choose to designate the order in which folders must be approached. So once I have made whichever folders that I'm going to use, so this might be a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday folder. For the example I built, I just used what I had. And so, I have Beowulf broken into 3 units. So once those folders are made, the first thing you can do is simple as this. Once you have a folder, these options will pop up. If you don't see the options, it's because you don't have a folder. And if you click student completion, it automatically defaults here. See, I can't even click it, that they must now complete them in sequential order. So what must they do? Now we're going to see that this is the same window that we'll see later that has more options, but under folders, our only option is complete. So before they can go to my second folder, they must complete the first. Before they can go to my third folder, they must complete the second. And then I'm going to check complete there, although I only have 3 folders, because just keeping it in order so that when I check student progress, I can now see how far they are through their folders. This will turn to a percentage once the students have begun working. So that's the first way you can use the student completion option, that when you put your work into folders, put them in the order that you want the students to complete it, and then you just simply go here and designate it must be completed in this order. And you might only want to complete the first two. That's up to you. Save it, bam. So if my student was to log onto this page, they would not even be able to open this folder till they have met the requirements in this folder. So that's layer one. Second layer, and this is the one that, you know, as I was digging into it and learning more about this feature that I was a little wowed by, is within the folder, we now have that same option available, and we can do so much more. I'm gonna check my notes to make sure I haven't gotten all into this and not covered anything important. Bam, 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 bam. No, okay, good. So, and I mean, this is really simple, right? And remember, these sessions are recorded. So if you think, well, I want to go home and build these folders this weekend, you can always go back. I'm gonna send you the links to all the sessions for today and kind of revisit how to do it. But I promise you that Schoology is pretty intuitive, that it kind of recognizes what you want to do and prompts you in the right direction. So literally all I did is I set up my 3 folders. And again, your folders might be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It might be units. It might be subjects according to the schedule that day. Because you can also do it to folders inside folders. So my elementary teachers who have a Monday folder, and then you have each subject, you could have those subjects lined up according to the schedule for the day, and then say, they must do it in sequential order, and they can't decide, like, you know, some 5th graders I know might choose to skip over reading to go do math, and this would prevent them from doing that. So once inside that folder where the work is, okay, I'm a little concerned that I'm getting text team. Okay. Once inside of the folder, I can then determine what my students must do to work through the folder. And look at how easy this is. I mean, I don't know, and if you're already using it, then you got one up on me, because I only discovered it this week, getting ready for today's PD, and I'm a bit amazed by it. So watch how easy this is. I put all the things in my folder that I needed for this week. So this is the text of what they're going to read, a PowerPoint, questions, like a graphic organizer to show me they read through that PowerPoint. They have a video, it's like a 5-minute video of background that they're going to watch. And then I'm going to know they watched it because I created this exit ticket with 4 questions from it that they're going to need to answer. As they're reading Beowulf, they have to put summaries of every 12 lines. And then at the end of the week, so yesterday, last night, they had questions due on everything this week, all this week's reading. So how do I make sure? Yes.
Hey, so real quick, there's been some comments in here that really, I think, are really important to this.
Okay, let me go back to the chat box.
April mentioned that basically when you do this option that you're talking about, the due dates come off so that they can track the completion. And then Miss Adams piped in and said that if you go to the grade book, you can actually add that date back in it. So
right.
I'm inspired by you guys. I mean, I think this is great collaboration right here. I love this.
Well, and I love that there's folks using it, because, like, I mean, again, I have such a limited perspective, because remember, I'm coming to Schoology as a teacher who's used it for 4 years. And I mean, we've all heard, you know, I don't want to say horror stories, so I'll say rumors of McHenry English, right? Of Mick English. And so when I saw something that said completion, I'm like, no, thank you. Like, they're getting graded on what they do. And I never checked it out. So as I'm working with elementary teachers and I'm working with just pedagogy that I've never used before, I'm learning lots of things that I hadn't. So I'm definitely want to come back to those of you who have been using it to pipe in and to tell me how, and are there any glitches and downfalls, and what do we need to do with it. So for those of you who have not used it before, watch how easy this is, right? So I threw all my work in this folder. This is my work for an entire week. But because my students are virtual, I want to make sure that they're actually doing the prerequisite to do the assignment, because in my world, my students write really well, and sometimes their writing is so well that I'm not real sure they did the prerequisite to the activity. So watch what I can do here. So I want to make this folder student completion, and I'm going to add a requirement for every activity in here. Depending on what the activity is, we'll open up what the different requirements are. So Beowulf text, okay, it's a PDF. The only thing we can require is view the item. Next up is the PowerPoint of an introduction. Again, it's a PDF. All I can do is view the item. Next up in this folder, I have the graphic organizer, which is an assignment. So I can either determine they simply got to do it and turn it in, or I can set a score that until they reach that score, they can't move on to the next assignment. Now, I'm not going to be on top of grading that much that I want to prevent them. So I'm just going to say they must submit that graphic organizer. They need to show me they did the background information before they move on to the reading. And then for the video, and I'm trying to determine, okay, here's the reality. So there's a lot of utopian ideas with virtual learning, right? So to view an item means what? They clicked on it and opened it. So, I mean, keep that as a mindset, because what I was wondering and thinking about it last night, if you have evening shift and you need to monitor that your students are watching the recording, one of the things that you can do is to put it in your class as an MP4, and then require that they watch it before they do the work. But again, that simply means they open the file. So just keep that in mind. But requirements here, I'm going to add. So I made that exit ticket for my class. And then here is where I'm going to say, if you watch that video, you can get 100 on this exit ticket. I just lost my window. Give me a sec. I clicked too many places at one time. And I didn't save it, so we know what that means. Love internet from home. Okay. There we go. Oh, it did save it. Yay. Okay. So now I'm through my video. So that's really an exit ticket for my movie. I want to make sure they watch that 5-minute movie. And so they're going to have to score 100 on that exit ticket. And then I had a couple of more assignments. So they need to submit that. And now I'm going to save my changes. So what happens on the student view, this is another, I think, benefit. I've had teachers ask me, how can we make this checklist for students so they can see the work they've actually done? And here's one of the ways we can do it, because this is visible from the student view. And when they complete it, that check turns green. And then right here is my view as a teacher. So I can see how much each student has completed of that assignment. So I'm also seeing this being valuable once the kids are back in class, right? Because if we have Apple Classroom, we can watch the screen and see what they're doing. But if I made a folder of today's assignment and it had like 3 things in it, I can always go here to see as a class where we are on task with today's assignments. So I think there's a lot of flexibility with how this can be used, both virtually and once we return for the virtual environment, or back to the traditional environment. All right, So we did this and that. And here's something else that's, those of you who are copying to courses, there are some glitches with that. If you're using Google and you have an attachment from your Google Drive, when you copy something to another course, it doesn't take that attachment with you. But if you build this folder with these requirements and I copy it to another course, it takes all the requirements for that folder with me. So just those of you who are at the secondary level and working across multiple courses, like most things in Schoology, build it within one course and you can copy it to others. Da, da, da. Got that. And then here is something, okay, so before March 13th of last year, I was on this kick to start employing gamification. Just this idea of like escape rooms and just different virtual games to promote learning. And then, you know, we swerved or pivoted. And I kind of lost focus on that. But I've seen a lot of teachers in the Schoology community talking about using that simple option to almost gamify their class. That if you have some type of quiz, a game here that's really a quiz, but they have to hit a certain high score before they move to the next assignment. Because if once you open an assignment, it is in this format that once they meet the requirement, they can hit next to go to the next assignment and walk through the different things in that folder. So you could have fun with it and kind of set it up almost as a gamify type virtual, you know, experience. So I think that could be fun. So I think I'm gonna go back and play with that in one of my units. I'll share it with you guys when I do, if you'd like. All right, I think that is all that I had on this. This would be a really good time to point out the help center, right? Because I found a lot of good information here for this. So, we kind of ignore the little S down in the corner a lot, but right here, I went to the little S, open Help Center, typed in student completion rules, and this article from Schoology is where I pulled pretty much all the information for today. So keep that in mind if you're getting stuck on something in Schoology. Remember, you can pop down here, click on the S, and then, you know, see what's posted in Schoology. And in this case, it was really helpful. So the other thing with this feature that I want to touch on before I check chat box and we switch to rubrics is we talked about in the previous sessions that when you create an assignment, and you can do this for other features too, there are the 3 dots down here to individually assign it to a student, and you would type in the student's name here that assignment would be. But when you create a folder, there's not the option to limit who sees it. So under options here, these are really options for your folders. That's why it doesn't pop up until you have folders. Once you create the folder, you can individually assign the folder to the students to view it. And I mean, they pop up so you can click them off real quick. So summer school, small grouping, they made an individual folder for each student. So something to think about as we work toward differentiating and accommodations. But also if you wanted to put your kids in teams, and each team has a different folder, like for some type of puzzle activity, they're gonna bring back whole group or something. But again, until I started digging into this and looking at it, I didn't understand how to individualize folders. So that is how you would do it once you're in the folder and you have options for your folder to individually assign it or to make it student completion. Okay, so I'm gonna pop over to chat window Do I need to see anything in the chat window? Because there's a lot in that chat window. Okay.
I don't see anything. I've been following all the questions.
Okay.
A lot of us is being silly about Jupiter and me joking that Alex needs more assignments, and now Ms. Drivebus is trying to get me in trouble.
Okay, well then I'm gonna move on. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch gears to rubrics. And here's my funny backstory on rubrics. I'm a career changer. I worked many careers before teaching, but after 9/11, I just had the opportunity to follow my dream of teaching. And so I went to CNU, and my first semester, like in October, they cut the education program. But I had really fallen in love with CNU and their English department. So I stayed and got an English degree. Excuse me. And when I sat for the praxis, I had not taken any education courses. And I remember there being a question on there about a rubric, and I didn't know what that word meant. So somehow like reading comprehension skills really helped me on that one, because now 17 years later, I very much know what a rubric is. And I do use them in Schoology. So I'm gonna try and be good about my time and give you guys an overview and some actual hands-on looks at what you can do with it. Because, I think we kind of look at rubrics as, oh, that's an English thing, that's a project thing, that's a secondary thing. And I think it could actually offer shortcuts to all of our grading. So, according to Schoology, I pulled a quote from their video. Rubrics provide a powerful, customizable tool for providing criteria-based feedback and added consistency in evaluating student work. Great quote. So here are the activities that you can put a rubric with. You can do it with assessments, which is that blue puzzle piece. When I was originally planning today's PD, we were going to do student completion and rubrics and assessments. And then someone told me that I give way too much information at a given time. So we're gonna push that blue puzzle piece to another boot camp. I know my elementary teachers have hopped in there and are actively using that one, so I'm learning a lot from them. But I think for those who kind of followed my advice about the big three, and those of us at the high school who are using test quiz almost exclusively because it is way easier, we're going to find some things with that blue puzzle piece that are going to help us, especially if writing on PDFs is still a problem for you. And especially if you need to have more screenshots of like math problems, science experiments, maps, reading passages, that blue puzzle piece is going to be our friends. So in assessments, you can add a rubric, but you also can do it with any given assignment. You can do it with discussion boards, because I think discussion boards are a powerful tool, but how do we make them valuable? And I think one of the ways we do that is by showing the students how we're assessing their responses. And then of course you can do it on test quizzes. And if you think about that, like the great benefit of doing a test quiz in Schoology is the idea that it'll grade itself, except for the short answer and essay questions. So you do have the option for short answers and essays to already have a pre-made little rubric, like 1 to 5 points, 1 to 10 scale, and then just clicking that to get you through it a little quicker. I haven't used that feature, but I've used the rubrics for everything else. So in this little practice class I threw together for today, you're going to see this is what it looks like when you use a rubric, that it automatically shows the students what the score will be determined by. So here's an example. Last year for my final exam was essay-based, and it was just a real fundamental rubric to demonstrate the reading skills. I typed in the criteria and then kind of stayed consistent with the math because, not my friend. And then as I graded it, I literally just click, 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 and it was graded pretty quickly. But when they look at the assignment, they see these details as soon as they look at the assignment. here is an example if you use a rubric that you create with a discussion board. You know, they see what is the prompt for the discussion board, and then here is how I'm going to give you quotes, or excuse me, points. So you have a total of 20 points possible, and then I would just read the response, and there would be a little square over here that I click on it and give this one 15, give this student 20, give this student 10, and the other students can't see it. But if you're trying discussion boards and you're seeing that your responses aren't real valuable, or if you want to use that as a way to authentically grade, here's a way to make it quick and easy to grade. And we do have some teachers doing some really meaningful things with discussion boards. So I think that might need to be like an open PD. We have one Friday, because some teachers are having students post artwork. Other teachers are having students record themselves giving a video prompt response. So it almost becomes like a flip grid, but at a more secondary level, and housing everything together and allowing them to comment on each other. So, but anyway, this is what a discussion board would look like with it. And then here is just another activity that is kind of the other way to do a rubric. So here it lists the criteria with a points system in each column. And then this one is like my generic, I'm really only grading it for completion. So they're going to get an A, B, C, or D or below. And so I'm kind of just skimming over the work and seeing what they did and doing a quick grade. And so this would show up on the assignment, and with one click, it drops their grade in. So like anything else with technology and with Schoology, especially if you're new to it, you're going to have the option to put the work in now, front loading it, or on the other side when you're grading it. But the problem is, if you're letting yourself, I need to hurry up and get this assignment in, I'll spend the time grading it, then you're going to perpetually do that every time you assign it. Whereas if we kind of build some rubrics that we can employ for different assignments and activities, we can copy them over and use them again and again. So let's jump in and physically look at how these are built and what we might do with them. Excuse me. All right. So like with Schoology, there's multiple places you can do the same thing, which is both a good thing and sometimes an overwhelming thing. So to set up your rubrics, you can come over here to grade setup. Even if you're not using it, it's still going to be there. And I've had some folks ask, like, can we get rid of some of these? Some of these we can. Some of these are different apps I'm trying to play with and make available to you. But if I put it in for me, it puts it in for everyone. But as far as the actual Schoology features, no, we can't do anything to kind of clean this up on your side. Remember, the students don't see all this. So even if you're not using grade setup, it is still there. And I've not set anything up in mine yet. So this is probably what yours looks like. And over here to the right is where you're going to click on for your rubrics. So once you create any rubrics, they'll come here and be available to you. And it'll tell you, I've used this one once in this course. I've not used this one in this course. I've used this one once and this one once. You can click on them here to open them up and see what those rubrics look like. Do note this orange warning at the top. This is really important. So if I design a rubric for a specific activity, and then I decide I want to edit it a little bit to use it for a different activity, I am now affecting the first time I used it. And maybe that doesn't matter, but maybe that student will see the grade on the previous activity change. So what you will want to do is, if you want to edit one of your own rubrics, then I'm going to come here and throw it to my resources. and then go to my resources and edit it there, save it as a new rubric, and then import it back here. So I know that's a few steps, and if you haven't been playing with resources, it might not be quite tangible. But the takeaway there is, once you have a rubric here and it's assigned, like this one's already been used, I can edit this one and it won't affect anything. But if I were to edit this rubric, it could change the grade of an assignment already. Now, we're not pulling grades from Schoology, so it's not going to affect the overall grade. But if you have students or parents who are astute to those grades that are kind of popping into this grade book, you might get questioned about it. So just keep that in mind. All right. So the multiple places that you can do. So if you want to create a rubric, you can come here. This is where I suggest doing it. I didn't do this originally, but now that whenever I create one, I do, the more that I've learned about rubrics and how to most effectively use it. So if I come here and just create a new rubric, it's going to be here waiting for me to attach it to any assignment I give. So if you are new to doing rubrics, this is where I suggest to do it, to go to your grade setup, and your default will be to look at your grading scales. And then if you click to rubric, you can create a new rubric from here, which is now part of your personal repertoire of what you can use to grade students. And you can share that across grade level, across content, to keep things consistent by putting it in your resources and then sharing it with other people in your department or grade. Also remember, this grade setup is specific to this class, but once I make a rubric, I can copy it over to my other classes so it's available there too. So that's the first place, and that's the suggested place I would offer for creating rubrics. The other option is if you go to resources, you can create your rubric right inside of there and house it there. So you can copy it over there to other courses or share it with other people. And then the other place that you can use it, and this is where I first started using it before I really had an understanding, is if you create an assignment and we come down to grade it, see right here, if I'm going to put if I'm going to say 90, 80, 70, whatever, then I'm just going to leave it numeric. But I have the option of, once I have them in that gradebook setup, all those rubrics, you remember these are those 4 rubrics I just showed you, now become available to me. So here I have the option to create a new rubric just for this assignment, and it will dump it into that grade setup. So it's one of those kind of two sides of the same coin. But once you've created that rubric, so you can kind of think about, like, is there something your kids are turning in regularly, whether it's a project you do every year or like journals weekly, or something that you want to have that click here to give feedback, create that rubric, toss it onto that assignment, and when it's time to grade it, when you open the assignment, you'll get a checklist of just which points do you want to give them. It totals it, it drops a grade in, you're done. So just think about ways that, what are some things you can shortcut your grading and still offer authentic feedback. Okay, we covered all of that. Okay, so this is what I suggest. So there's lots of rubric building programs out there. Rubik Star is one that I know a lot of folks use. I think it's redundant to use a rubric building program and then come over to Schoology and do your rubric, but make Google your friend, and you can always see what other rubrics there are out there and steal them. So, I mean, you're not going to be able to import them. You're actually going to have to type them up. But again, once you create them, they're yours. And so this was a fun one that I found in clicking around last night. Just is for 3rd and 4th grade writing. And here are the criteria that we're judging them on. And rather than grades, it actually determined whether they were a novice, an apprentice, a practitioner, or an expert. So, you know, when you're starting to think about, you know, I want to try rubrics, but what do I put on the rubric? I mean, go out there and make Google your friend. Just, you know, what is the subject? You know, what is the assignment? I taught very unexpectedly. I haven't tried this, so I don't know what's going to come up. Public speaking last semester, and I didn't have anything in my tool belt for it. So when it came time to score them, you know, I made Google my friend. And because they were giving weekly speeches, I go in, I build a rubric one time, and then as they're giving their speech or as I'm watching their flip grid, I just go through, click, 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 and graded them live. So that's another thing, a great thing about rubrics too. If there's any type of presentation, that if you have a rubric set up, it's real easy to kind of click through the objectives when they meet them, and then your grading is done as they finish. Okay, so let's actually jump in and look at creating a rubric and a couple of tricks I found last night. So I'm going to go back to my grade setup, not my grade book, and to rubrics. And I'm going to add a rubric, and I'm going to drop it to make it. How big can I make it? Okay, that's fine. All right, so you're going to give your rubric a title. And remember, you want to give it the title. I'm really horrible at coming up with examples for stuff, but this is what it will be labeled. Oh, it's got a limit on how, no, okay. This is what it'll be labeled in that grade book for you to copy over. So you want it to be one that you know that's what it is. We've got rows according to the criteria, which you have to add, which is why I said if you go out and like search some different ideas, that's where you can pull for it. And then you have columns, and we can add to all of this. So you're going to enter the detail for whatever your objective might be. So whatever that objective is, and then a description of it. And then as you add criteria, if I want another column, you just simply come down here and hit plus criteria, and you can have however many you need. And it's just as easy to get rid of them. You just X them out to get rid of them. And then you can also grab these handles here and move them around as you create it with what you want to emphasize versus you don't. You can come over here and change the points on how much each criteria is worth. But let's say like I started this one at 20 points. So this 4-column thing works pretty good. But here I'm only going to make it worth 10 points. So it doesn't work so well. So what we can do is we can X out. So I have fewer scales. So see, there's a little X right there in shadow. You can barely see it. So up here, there's, you know, they can get 15, 20, 15, 10, or 5 points. But down here, I only want 10 or 5. So, and it works the other way too with that little plus sign. If you wanted to break that up more and offer more points here, you can. So, I mean, you have the ability to really customize these. It's going to tell you your total points down here. So, you know, determine, do you want to equal 100? Are you okay if it's 20 points? Completely up to you. And then if anyone's working with, I suddenly forgot what it's called, like when we're teaching according standards-based, there you go, standards-based objectives, you do have the ability to come down here and add this. So one of the things that I think that we're going to start working toward is the standard-based objectives, especially at the elementary level. That's where, like, you know, the latest trend is. And this is going to give you the ability to do it. So it's kind of like with Plan Book, right? That we can go in here and type in our own criteria, or that we stole from Google, or we can come over here and look up standards from any SOL. I mean, it gets deep, right? But, and then we could make that the actual objective. So if you are in a position where you're having to show that students met certain SOL objectives, that could be a reason to do one of these rubrics, because you could list the different objectives and then simply check off when they meet the criteria for that. And then over here, see where it says mastery? I don't think we as a school division are employing this right now. I mean, it's there, it's available to you. But if you decide to be standards-based or do an assessment like this, it will automatically track the student's mastery of that SOL. So that's not real relative in my world, but especially for my lower level teachers, if you think that's something that we should look into setting up and helping you track, let me know and we'll do that. I think it also would be really helpful when we're back in the world of SMART goals and documentation, and it's just going to automatically do it. As long as we choose a learning objective here, it's going to track how well the student has mastered that objective throughout the time period that we ask it to. So that's definitely a tier 2 skill. I don't want to spend too much time there. It's where I see us going. I see more and more things moving inside of Schoology. Like I foresee attendance moving inside of here pretty soon too. All right. So what have we done? So we know, and also realize this. Okay, so here's what I fall into when I used to do rubrics. Like I would have these columns and I would end up circling like this, because it really wasn't a 20, but it wasn't quite a 15. So I would like circle everything, but you can still come over here and you can override how many points you give that specific student. So this isn't actually created yet, so if I click over here, nothing's happened. But if I was grading the student and I decided they're really between the two, I'd be able to click here and put in 17.5. So you can click the box to give them however many points they met, or you can override it and kind of give them a range in between. Here's a couple of other things you can do. Depending on your view on this, let's say I don't want to give points for following the directions, but I want to give deductions if they don't. So let's say I added all my criteria. Actually, you know what? Let's do it this way. Let's go back and edit this one that's not being used. Okay, so this is just my typical essay rubric, equals 100 points. And by this point, I expect my kids to be able to use MLA format. So I really want to come in here and I want to deduct points if they don't. So I think I'm only going to, whoops, went the wrong way. I'm going to give them a minus 10 if they did not use MLA whatsoever. And I'm going to give them a -5 if they used it, but not quite right. And I'm gonna go in there and explain that, but I'm not gonna take the time to do it. So this would be, did not follow format directions whatsoever. This would be some formatting present, does not fully follow it. So if you see over here, it's worth 0 points. But should that, if I save it, and I now grade that student, and this is the rubric that pops up, and I were to click this box or this box, it's going to be a deduction instead of an addition. And then if the student did everything correct, I'm not going to put anything there. But let's look at the flip side of it, right? Let's say positive. We know I'm a PBIS advocate. Let's say, what about the other side of it? Sorry, I didn't scroll down and see all this added. So let's get rid of you and get rid of you. So let's look at the other side of it. Let's say we want to give bonus points. And this is how we would do that. So how many bonus points I want to give? We'll do a +5. Actually, that won't work. We're going to give 0, and I'll explain why. Because we need this to be 0, right? Because we don't want it to hurt students. But I would explain here above and beyond effort. And then over here, because it's worth 0, it's not hurting or helping them, but I would override it and give them a 10 if they did the extra credit piece. So those are other options in building a rubric. So you're going to be able to include as much criteria as you want. You're going to be able to break this down to as many columns as you need. And you're going to be able to differentiate that. So some might only have 2 columns. Some might have 4 columns. You're going to be able to come down here and explain how they earn the credit or what the criteria for each of these groups are. Again, if you want to offer bonus points, make them worth 0 and explain how they earn the bonus, and you would override it here. If you want to do deductions, you just put that -5 in front of it, and it won't affect the student grade unless you click it. Bam, 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 bam. We did this, we did that, we did that. And then last note is if you delete a rubric from here, and I've used that one, so I can't delete it. I've not used this one, so I can delete it. You cannot recover it anywhere. So if you end up like having more rubrics than I need for this course, throw it to your resources in case you change your mind later. You can't delete it if you're using it anywhere. But if you have like some extra rubrics as you start building this tool up and you don't need it for that class, if you delete it, it is forever gone. So, you know, I've showed you before how there's various different recycling bins that you can save yourself if you accidentally delete something. In this grade setup, that is not the case. If it is not being used and you delete it, it's just get taken out the trash for you. All right, I think I've covered everything for rubrics. Consider this, right? Because I mean, we looked at Google and saw how teachers are using it, you know, at lower elementary levels all the way through higher grades. And don't always think big project. Think about grading shortcuts. Now, if it is a large project, I will say, I mean, I think it is critical that you point out what the goals are for them to master that project. But again, going back to this example, this is just a weekly assignment I give. It's a quick grade. I'm gonna just kind of flip through it real quick, see how you did it, how long are the answers, read a couple, and then just one click, done grading, move on. So those are the 2 ways that you could do a rubric. You could really build up your criteria here with individual points, or if you're going to give a completion grade, what are the levels of completion and what defines each? And I think it applies to small assignments, big assignments, and again, anything that doesn't have a numeric grade, like, 8 out of 10 are correct. Anything that you want to give kind of a more holistic grade to, or that you want to grade individual criteria, this is the way to go. It's going to take a little bit of time to set it up, but once it's set up, you forever have it in Schoology, and the other assignments you'll be able to grade like this. All right, so I am like everything, you've got to get in and play with it, like everything, right? I have thrown away so many rubrics that, just over the years, just, what I think is good. I am terrible about reinventing the wheel. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so I can see everyone's faces. So hide your face. But over the years, I have made and stopped and reused, and as new English teachers come in, I have a folder filled with rubrics that I don't use anymore. But again, putting them in this virtual space where we're now teaching, and hopefully that's where you're going to be able to turn papers in. One of the future boot camps I'm going to do is how to use Google even if you don't have a Google account, because grading via Google is your friend. And then with these rubrics, real quick grading. All right.